started is a little bit of a problem, I think. I guess I should tell you, especially for those of you who weren't here last week, that what I'm doing here is just simply wanted to tell a story about Albuquerque from beginning in 1706 and then lasting until after the coming of the railroad up until close to 1900. And because it's a story, it's got to have a central core to it, a theme that runs through the story. And there's a no-brainer way of doing that, and that is to tell the story of the buildings of San Felipe de Neri, because they are there, at least in spirit, since 1706. Actually, the first church probably didn't get built right in 1706. They may have laid out a place where it would be built, but it's not thought to have been built until maybe the middle of the teens, so maybe 1714 or something like that. There maybe had used some other small facility during that time until the first church was built. But I don't know that. So who knows? That history is just not recorded, I suppose. At any rate, it's a story about Albuquerque. It's a story about history and culture. It's not a story about religion. It's history and culture is really what I'm after. And this week, advance this, just to give you a little orientation. I started with this one last week, and I will again this week as well. You can see this is my favorite picture of San Felipe that was done probably about 1912. And of course you can see the church on the left and the rectory that's on the right. And the first story I have for you today really deals with the rectory, but it deals with the first floor of the rectory, because the top floor was not built until 1890. But the bottom floor was there from very early on, since they built the church as it is today in 1793. So the players in our story for this first story include Jean-Baptiste Lamy, as his biographer refers to him, but I'll use the popular pronunciation of Lamy. He came in 1851. He took a very unusual route of getting to Albuquerque. He was in Ohio, was sent to establish a new diocese in New Mexico, because the year before 1850 is when when New Mexico became a territory officially. So he came, but instead of coming just on the Santa Fe Trail, which would have been the most logical way to get to Santa Fe, he went down the Mississippi River to New Orleans and went across Texas and then came from the south. And he had a good reason for doing that I won't go into, but if you're interested in it, I'll point out one of the books the first one you're going to see that I'll show you here. His biography. You would learn why he did that. He had good reason for it. He came with a companion of his, who somebody had known since he was fairly young, a priest by the name of Joseph Mashbouf. And I probably am messing up the pronunciation of the last name, but I'm told that the M-A-C is not Mar, but it's Mash. It's softer in French. So I think I'm close, but I might still be off a little bit. He was an interesting character, and he becomes a very important character in our first story. As the vicar for the bishop, he was the enforcer, and he comes head to head with this next character, who is Jose Manuel Gallegos. He was the pastor at San Felipe when they arrived in 1851. Now you can see this picture is roughly taken in about 1882, 85, something like that, I'm guessing on these dates. So it was taken quite a bit later, And that's true for the other two as well. They were all about the same age. They were all 40 years old, 37 to 40, something in that range. Pretty young, I think, for a bishop to be sent out here. They must have had a great deal of faith in him, in his ability. Gallegos was from New Mexico. He was from ABQ. He was born here, I believe, in 1815, as I recall. I have it written down here somewhere. But it's close enough. It's within a year or so. He was an ambitious young man. He's an intelligent person. He wanted to do something with his life other than perhaps farming or ranching, and there aren't too many opportunities as a young man doing that. And so becoming a priest was a prestigious job, and he decided that was what he would do. So he studied initially with Padre Martinez in Taos, and then went on, finished up his studies in Durango, Mexico, where he was ordained, and then came back to New Mexico. There were 3 or 4 priests who were like that at the time. When Bishop Lamy came, he knew a fair amount about New Mexico, about the problems that were here. And one of the big problems was that they didn't have enough priests. There were only 15 in all of New Mexico in 1851, and 6 of them were considered to be too old to really perform their work anymore. So only maybe about 9 to work with when Lamy got here. And that becomes a much more serious problem when they get to Albuquerque and they meet Padre Gallegos for the first time. There are 3 sources for what I'm telling you. This is the biography of Lamy, written by Paul Horgan, which won the Pulitzer Prize. It was written in 1975, or published that year. It is told, I think, pretty much from the point of view of Mashgouf and Lamy, and so it has that kind of bias to it. That's the information that he had. He got most of his information from letters and church documents and things of that nature. And so he didn't have as much information as the next writer had, and that is Fray Angelico Chavez. And his book was written and published in 1985, so 10 years later. This was a whole biography of just Gallegos. And he takes an entirely different approach with Gallegos. He is an apologist for Gallegos and explains a lot about why he did the things that he did. And we'll talk about that in some more detail. But Fray Angelico Chavez was a brilliant man. He was a Franciscan priest. He died in, I think, about 1996. I had the good fortune of meeting him, actually, in about 1962, when he was much younger. And I'll tell you a story about it during the question and answer period. The 3rd piece was written in 1993. It's not a book. It's not even a booklet. It's an article that appears in this, actually it's the dominant article that appears in this publication, Church Buildings and Land of Old Albuquerque. They were celebrating the 200th anniversary of the building that's there today. So it was written by Thomas Steele. He was a Jesuit priest, and he was also an extraordinary, really a very fine historian as well. He passed away maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I got to talk to him one time on the phone, exchanged a letter with him, and got to hear him speak once, but I wish I'd have known him better. he adds to the story of Padre Gallegos in a very important way. So here's what the church looked like in 1872, and you can see the rectory going off to the east. When they get there in 1851, when Lamy gets there with Mashbu, they begin to learn, and actually they probably already knew a lot about him before they even arrived. They learned that he lived there in the rectory with a woman and had lived there for a long time with her. There were also 3 children in the household as well. By the way, the woman's name, she becomes an important part of the story, and I have it written down here so I get it correctly. Maria de la Jesus Trujillo de Hinojos. But they just knew her as Jesusita Trujillo, and so they referred to her as Jesusita. She was reported to be a very beautiful lady, and together she and Padre Gallegos also ran a mercantile store in the rectory on the east end. So 2 strikes against the Gallegos right away. But they also learned that he's a very worldly man, that he loves to get out and be with the other men in the community. He plays cards, he drinks with them. When they have fandangos, he loves to dance with the women. This is all part of his life. And so, to make a long story short, a year later, December of 1852, I've seen 2 dates for this. I think it's, but this is close enough. December of 1852, the bishop decides that that's enough for Gallegos, and he suspends him. He's not excommunicated, which is another even more drastic thing to do, but he suspends him, basically fires him. And so Mashbuf is sent down to Albuquerque and is also going to replace him as the pastor in Albuquerque, at least temporarily. So he's going to lose his job. Now, I want to go back because there's more to the story than this. Gallegos ended up in Albuquerque in 1845, so 7 years earlier than this. And when he came, Jesusita was apparently with him already at that time. And when they got here, the rectory was in totally dilapidated condition. It was unlivable. And so he had come from a certain amount of money, and I think she did too. Her background was that her husband was a Mexican officer who was killed in a battle with Navajo Indians in the 1830s. So what they did is put their money into it and rebuilt the rectory and made it into a really first-rate place to live. Everybody who went there said it was one of the nicest places in town to live. Excuse me. And so that's 1845. 1846 is the next year when the United States military shows up and takes over. This is manifest destiny. The Army of the West comes to New Mexico and simply tells the people, you're no longer Mexican citizens, you're now citizens of the United States. And that's it. And there wasn't much that they could do about it. There was a little bit of resistance, but nothing significant. And so in Albuquerque, there was a military presence beginning that year until 1867, so 21 years. So that's an important part of the story. The people of Albuquerque were happy enough, I guess, to be American citizens, but they didn't know what this military was going to do. And so the town council, this part of the story comes from Father Steele. the town council, the ayuntamiento, the head of the ayuntamiento gets together on Christmas Day, 1867. It may have actually been on 1847, I'm sorry, 1847. It may have actually been 1846, Christmas Day. I think Father Steele may have been wrong about that. At any rate, he gets together with them, and one of the promises that the commander of the Army of the West had for the people of New Mexico was that your land is your land, and it's sacred, and you will get to keep it, and you will not interfere with your religion, and so on, a number of things like that. So, but the people were still pretty uncertain about what this military presence in Albuquerque was all about. And so they decided that since individual property owners, their land would be protected, they decided they would give the church and the rectory and the property that it was on, it was right on the plaza, they would give it to Padre Gallegos, and then he would own it. Now flash forward to 1852, and now Gallegos learns that he has been suspended, and Mashbub says to him he'll need to leave the rectory, and Father Gallegos says, I don't think so because I own it. So this becomes a significant battle. He wasn't. The problem here was that he was not trying to keep the church and the rectory, except that he put a lot of money. He and Jesucita put a lot of money into the rectory. He willingly, apparently, according to Father Steele, had given the church back to the diocese. He said, you know, that's silly. I don't own the church, but I put a lot of money into this rectory, and you'll have to buy it from me. They didn't want to do that, so it ended up being a court case, and it ended in there was a district court under U.S. law. Was held, I believe, in Valencia County, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a hung jury. And so with a hung jury, then the property remains with Gallegos. And so what has to happen is that the diocese has to buy the building from him, which they do, for $1,500. I think what's important is to pay a little more attention to what Angelico Chavez says about all this. So let me go over a couple of points. For example, he says that the little store that they ran, and by the way, their best day for business was Sunday. That was a no-no also. But, you know, think about it. These the farmers came in from the valley. We didn't have 200 horsepower cars to get here, and it was not easy to get into town. So when they came on Sunday, and so he's pointing out, his point of view is they're probably using this money. I don't think he says with certainty, but he said they're likely using the money to maintain the church and keep it going, because the people of Albuquerque don't have the kind of money that it takes to keep the church up. And it was always a problem. So he said there was nothing wrong with this. And then as far as his romantic relationship, which we assume was probably right, with Jesucita, he said that when Gallegos took his vows, he did not take a vow of chastity. And so as far as he was concerned, this was perfectly all right. And apparently the people of Albuquerque saw it pretty much that way too. Not all, but most of them. Because when he was suspended or from his duties, they passed out a petition to send up to the bishop saying, please reinstate him. And there were 900 signatures on something like that, so a lot. So this is partially what both Chavez actually and Horgan both report the same thing, that such a petition was distributed, and the bishop simply wrote back and said, "It's my decision, it's not yours." And that was it. Okay, we now replace it. So in my mind, what we're seeing is these two men going head to head. The Mashput representing Catholicism as it was practiced in the rest of the world, and Gallegos representing what has emerged out of generations of New Mexico being isolated, and their approach to religion, to their Catholic religion, was different, at least in some regards, and so I think that's a strong indication of that aspect of culture and how it emerged in New Mexico. I will just quickly show you one other picture. In 1846, when the Army marched into New Mexico, there was an Army officer named Hebert. He wrote a book, and it's on the list. It's a very well done book. It may be a little hard to get a hold of, although I managed to do it. I think I had to pay a reasonably hefty price for it, because it's now printed in color, and beautiful color paintings that he did that are in the book. And he visited that October, I think it's 18th, 1846. So it's only a couple of months after the Army of the West came, and he spent a little time with Gallegos, and he mentions Jesucita, although not by name, but he mentions that she's there and that she's very beautiful, so on. So I suppose that's my story. I hope I'm not leaving out anything that I should have, but I can answer more questions about it later on. But Gallegos leaves because there's a dramatic encounter that goes on between Gallegos and Mashput shortly after this, and it's a showdown at Mass in the obviously in the church, with the whole congregation being there, and it's a very interesting story. But Gallegos leaves, and he then runs for office and becomes the first U.S. representative from New Mexico in Congress, and he served for 2 terms. He ended up living in Santa Fe, and I don't know a lot about his life after he left Albuquerque. It's in the book, but I haven't read that part of the book, to be honest with you. Mashput was sent off to France in 1857 to see if he could recruit more priests, and he was successful. He came back with 6 more, and he came back with some nuns who were assigned to start a school in Santa Fe. And one of the priests was a Father Troussard, who was sent to Albuquerque to be the pastor. And you'll see a little bit about what he did. I don't want to say too much about him because we just don't have the time. It's not as important. What I'm really concerned about is, and here's most of what I say for the rest of the time, deals with this book by Father Steele, a much longer book published by the Albuquerque Museum. And it's History of San Felipe de Neri Church. And it mainly deals with the Jesuits who were there beginning in 1868. And that happens because Lamy goes back to Rome to recruit more priests in 1867. And while he's there, he talks to the head of the Jesuit order in Italy, and asks if he can please have some priests in New Mexico. And the head of the order saw this as an opportunity to really establish Jesuits in New Mexico. And so when Laney came back, he came back with 3 priests and 2 brothers. He brings them back to New Mexico with him, and they both end up, all 5 of them end up at San Felipe. So now you went from 1 priest, and now you have 3 priests and 2 brothers in Albuquerque. But there is a method behind all this. There is a plan behind all of this. The priest who is the most brilliant of the bunch, and he's a natural leader, was Father Donato Gaspari. He was referred to very often as a walking encyclopedia. Very bright man. He's a visionary and just a charismatic leader. He learns when he's here in Albuquerque that Troussard has purchased property that is off the southeast corner of the plaza. And here it is. If you look at the right side of the screen, see if I get the pointer here. Is this the pointer? Whoops, I turned it off. This one is. Okay, over here you have 19th Street coming up. So Lomas Boulevard today is down here somewhere. Of course, this is a modern map. So if you're coming up 19th Street, you get to this empty area here, which is the parking lot for the Albuquerque Museum. So now if you go look on the right, you can see again, here's 19th Street coming up, and then here's Old Town Road. And you can start to see just how much property it is. It's quite a lot of property that he had purchased. And on that property, he had started, and I guess the Jesuits had completed it. He had started a building which they called the El Cerco House. It's C-E-R-C-O, which has a number of different meanings in Spanish, but basically means an encirclement or a fenced-off area. And here they had, of course, they raised crops and vegetables and so on. Let me tell you a little bit about El Cerco House. This is one of the buildings of San Felipe de Neri. By 1872, they had established a library in Albuquerque for the first time. Had 14 books, 1,400 books in the El Cerco House. I assume it was something available for local people, I don't know. But it was certainly available for priests who came, priests and brothers. And by the way, those 5 who initially came were not the end of it. There were more who kept coming. And so they were living in this building, in the Cerco House, and they were also living in this, by the 1890s at least, were living in the 2nd floor of the rectory as well. I injected at this point, by 1895, there were 82 Jesuits in New Mexico, all the way from El Paso to Denver. As Father Steele put it, San Felipe was either directly or indirectly what they considered the mother house for the Jesuits in this part of the country for a very long time. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you? Well, I can tell you what else is in the Cerco House. For a very short time, they had it's almost not worth mentioning, they had a public school, literally a public school. The Bernalillo County was supposed to provide money for it, and it just didn't work out. So it didn't work. So they had the library, they had a chapel, they had a carpenter shop, a tailor shop, obviously a kitchen, and they had a winery. They produced some of the best wine in Albuquerque at the time. It was very good wine. They not only brewed their own grapes, but they got grapes, probably more grapes even than what they grew, from other farmers in the valley. And they produced this wine for a long period of time. They actually produced some income for it, which I think is interesting, because Father Gallegos couldn't do that. So they could produce something and make money. So there's obviously a dining room. They had a large sala, living room kind of place, and then the garden. And then very importantly, they established a print shop. This was something that Gaspari thought was very important, that they have a print shop where they could produce the kind of materials they needed, because they were educators and they were looking forward to establishing education in New Mexico as well. So I show this for a couple of reasons. This is from about 1895. And first of all, well, I'll tell you up front that eventually, by about 1927, this building became another of the buildings of San Felipe de Neri. This became the school. This was initially Bernalillo County Courthouse, which was built in 1888. And then they moved out of it about 1927 when they built the new Bernalillo County Courthouse in the Newtown area. So this became the school. Today, it's gone, and it's the playground for the San Felipe School, and the school is behind it. So if you're down that way and are looking around, that's where this was. But if you go to the third floor, and you look to the northeast, you can see the only picture there exists that we know of, that is the Circle House, and it's not a very good one. But it's this building that's back here, but all this other property that's around it, with all these trees and everything else, it was all part of the Circle House. And then if you pan the camera to the left and look out from the top, you can see, at least I'm guessing that that's where this camera was. You can't imagine where else it was, because it's up at a pretty good height. And you can see, of course, the church, and you can see the rectory. So this is taken after 1890. That's when the second floor of the rectory was built. This little building here is where La Placita dining room is now. So at any rate, that's all we can see from the top of that building. Now, this print shop was a big deal. They put a lot of money into getting good printing equipment. They learned from a man named William McGinnis, who published a local newspaper. They learned how to use the printing equipment. And they kept this printing business going until the 1950s. They produced a newspaper for the church and so on, and a lot of other documents that were needed and so on. But in 1874, there was a terrible flood. And this is probably not 1874. The photographs just were not being done at that time. But this gives you an idea of the fact that flooding in Old Town was always a huge problem. You can see the walls are wicking up moisture here and there. And Gaspari believed that it was a mistake to continue to try to print in Old Town, because the paper supply they had and everything would be damaged. Things that were already published could be damaged and so on. And so he moved it to Las Vegas. Now let me go back here. What did I do with that? Maybe I haven't even shown it yet. Let's see. Okay, yeah, here it is. You can see that here in Las Vegas, 1874, is when they established a foothold in Las Vegas. And so that's where it was published. Also, what they did, by 3 years after that, 1877, they established the College of Las Vegas, which is not college the way we think of it. It was really more of like a high school. I think a lot of the students they had there, they were hoping that they would become priests themselves. So it was kind of like a novitiate, as they would say, for young men who were thinking of becoming priests. But it was also, they were also teaching a broad spectrum of courses as well. The problem they ran into in Las Vegas was the fact that there was already a church established there. There was a parish. And the priest there was finding that his congregation was diminishing because the priests who were at the school were also saying Mass. And so people started going there. And so the pastor at the church there complained to the bishop and said, this can't be. I can't maintain my church as long as they're saying Mass across town. And so the bishop decided the best thing for them to do was to move out of Las Vegas and to move to Denver. And they did, and it became Regis University in Denver, Colorado. And so when you go online today, you will see that their origin is 1877 in Las Vegas, New Mexico. One of 25 Jesuit universities in the country. Unfortunately, they don't have quite the caliber of basketball there that they do at some of the other ones. Gonzaga and Marquette and Boston College and things like that. All right, I think I'm actually doing pretty good on time here. I showed this picture last time, and this is the church at Santa Cruz. And this church, as I mentioned last time, was built in the 1730s, so it's about 30 years older than San Felipe, the current San Felipe, and very much like it in many ways. Maybe a little larger. Today it certainly is larger because one of the arms of the transept part of the church goes out to the left here quite a bit. They added on to enlarge it. But there's some comparisons that can be made between this church and the one in San Felipe. First of all, this is what that church looks like today. It's been well maintained. They have a very large congregation because they're taking people in from little communities all around Santa Cruz. And it's also just a stone's throw basically from Española. And here's a shot that I did from on the inside. Walk out here for a second. It's a little dim to see, but what I really want you to look at is the ceiling here. I wonder, let me try something here. Let's see if I can. Well, this actually,
yes.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Now you can see maybe the ceiling just a little bit better. And I specifically shot this picture at this particular angle because I wanted to compare it with a shot that was done in 1881 at San Felipe. And this is San Felipe at that time. So you can see that the ceiling is basically the same. The vigas and corbels, everything about the church followed basically the same construction plan, in a sense. So what happens, though, in Albuquerque is that the Jesuits decide that propriety, and they're getting a lot of this from the bishop as well, from laymen. Propriety calls for something a little better than what the people of New Mexico could put together. They couldn't see that there was any kind of beauty or anything in a church that had, where you could see the rafters and so on. This was just unacceptable to them. And so they believed that things had to change. And so what the Jesuits did was build this structure that covered all that up. And that was probably done Father Steele told me that he thought it was done in 1916, and I think that's wrong. It was done maybe more like about 1890 or so. And I think these slats that are in the ceiling, I think that's what gets changed in 1916. Because we're pretty sure that this particular picture was taken about 1903. You can see there's some ladies over here in the style of dress. You can't see it real well, but that certainly doesn't look like 1916. Maybe I'm wrong. At any rate, that's what happens to the ceiling in the church. And so today, if you look at it, this is 2008 that I shot this. You can see how the ceiling now is a different material that's in that ceiling. You can also see how as it goes flat across the top, but on the sides, it slopes away, and that's there because they're allowing for all of those vigas that are still, all those corbels that are still up there above this. So if you went back, if it wasn't there, what would it look like? Well, you can kind of tell because you can go back to Santa Cruz, to the church there. And this is what the ceiling would, above what there is at San Felipe, this is what it looks like. And then there's another longer shot inside the church at Santa Cruz as well, very much like it is at San Felipe today, except with the exception of the ceiling. And this is a shot of the altar area at San Felipe. And it's interesting that the other thing that they thought propriety called for was something other than wood altars and wood things. They, in Europe they have it made out of marble. So they couldn't do that. They couldn't produce marble here to do it. So this is all painted wood. The wood is all painted to look like marble. And you can see it maybe a little better here in the pulpit. And they saved the pulpit, even though it hasn't been used in a long, long time. It's still there because it's a thing of beauty, and it is still there. I think this is interesting too. This is in the church at Santa Cruz, and it's an altar screen, and the altar screen is what goes behind an altar. At Santa Cruz, it was used as one of the side altars. They had several altars. You could see that was true also at San Felipe. But this was probably done in the 1700s. I tried to pin a date down for it, or even approximate, and I had trouble doing it. But it seemed to indicate, in one source that I had, that this was done in the 1700s, that it may have been, as it faded over a period of time, that it may have been enhanced, maybe even sometime in the 20th century. But what's interesting about it is that this is what would be behind an altar during all those years of isolation for New Mexico. And the artwork is typical of what they would do at the time. These were good artisans. This is the way they painted things. But as far as the Jesuits were concerned, and Padre, or the Archbishop was concerned, propriety called for something better than this. Wouldn't you prefer real statues instead of something like this? In Santa Cruz, they decided, they replaced those side altars with something else, but they at least kept this much on the side. It's a thing of beauty, and they did not want to lose it. At San Felipe, well, here's a close-up of it too. You can see it just a little bit better. And I think this is kind of what, visually, is kind of what Angelico Chavez gets at in his book, when he complains about the Angled people who came here from the East, and their observations about New Mexico is that they missed a lot, more than just visual things, but visually, this is the visual equivalent of what they missed. The thing of beauty, they thought, we want to get rid of this. You want to have real statues instead. So that's what's at San Felipe. And the other thing I think is interesting about it, this is, to explain who these are, this is San Felipe, who's in the middle. But remember, the very first patron saint for Albuquerque was Francis Xavier. And he's there. He's right here on the left side. And that sounds like a great story. I mean, if one of the people could time travel back from that time, they would say, yeah, he's still there. But because they really wanted him rather than San Felipe. But there's the other part of the story is that he was also a Jesuit, so that's probably why he was there. And then this is St. Ignatius Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit order. That's what's at the church today. There is a charm, and I think San Felipe reflects the different cultures that have blended together over the years. And in some ways you would maybe want to see those Vigas and corbels up there, and in other ways you think, well, it's still a thing of beauty the way it is, and that's all part of our history. The other thing that the Jesuits did, and there was a big deal, and this is a little map from Father Steele. You can see this property. Here's the church itself, the San Felipe. And behind it, there was this property where Church Street is located. And they bought that property from the county in 1877 so they could build a school. And so they did that. And the brothers were going to teach, I believe, just boys in the school. It was called Our Lady of the Angels School. And it was built, and they started teaching in it in 1878. And that building is still there. This is what it looked like in about 1935. It had, by that time, not been used for a long time. And you can see the water damage again from the way things were in Old Town. They control water a lot better nowadays, and this is what it looks like today. I should have shot that a couple of years ago. I assume this still belongs to San Felipe. I don't know that, but they probably rent it out for a private business. Now, we won't talk a lot about Sister Blandina, but a little bit. I mean, there are people today who give talks about her that will last the whole hour. She was a remarkable lady. She was to the Sisters of Charity what Father Gaspari was to the Jesuits. She was a brilliant leader. And she is today I believe the only religious person in New Mexico history who is actually under consideration for sainthood. So whether that will happen or not remains to be seen. But at any rate, she published a book. Well, actually, I don't know that she published it. She wrote it. It was her accounts of her life in New Mexico and possibly, in Trinidad too, before I think she got here. And she did this. She's got to keep a record of what she did, so she could share it with her own sister later on. And eventually it became published. It's an interesting book to read. She makes some mistakes. And for example, she thought for sure she was administering to Billy the Kid. And as it turns out, and she really was, this guy was called Billy the Kid. But there were a lot of bad guys in those days were called Billy the Kid. And so that's not true. But nevertheless, she did a lot of good. She was an amazingly amazingly fine person who like all saints, are devoted to caring for other people and devoted her life to doing that. There's this book that's on the book list, Old Town Albuquerque Guide to the History and Architecture. It's published by the Albuquerque Museum in 1980. It's a very good book. But there's one page in it that has, I think, a mistake in it. Here's Sister Blandina as a very old person. And it says here that she supervised the construction of the convent. Now, that isn't true. But there's a little part of her accounts in her book where she gets to Albuquerque. And she comes to Albuquerque in 1881, September of 1881. And when they were constructing the convent, they kept having a problem with this water damage again, where the corner of the building was falling down. And even after the building was finished, it was beginning to fall down again. And Father Gaspari said to her, you know, because she had come from Santa Fe, where she had been for some time, and she had worked with Italian stonecutters up there. So she ended up getting an Italian stonecutter to come to Albuquerque to fix the problem. And so he rebuilt the foundation around that corner and stabilized it properly, and it's held up ever since then. But that little bit from her story somehow gets embellished over the years, and pretty soon they decided that she had supervised construction of the whole building. Well, she didn't do that, but what she did do, when they wanted the Sisters of Charity to come down and take over for the brothers at the school, she came down with her mother superior and with a priest who was helping them out, and together they negotiated a deal with Father Gaspari that the Sisters of Charity would come to Albuquerque to teach, but they would only do it if they built a convent for them and gave them the title to it. And they did. And that's exactly what they did to get them there. I'll show you some interesting pictures. This is, I think I can date this to the winter, the late part of the year of 1880 or very early 1881. You see there's some snow on the ground. We're looking down, south on Romero Street toward the plaza, and of course you can see the back of the church. Here's the building they built for the school. And then there's another view that I think must have been taken about the same time from the street level again. Again, the terrible problem they had with controlling water in Old Town. This is probably early 1881. This is about the spring of this year is when they started building the convent. And in this picture, which I think is just absolutely wonderful, I love this picture, you can see that the construction has begun on the convent, which is right there. And it's easy to date this as far as the month is concerned, because this is fiesta time, and it's probably May of 1881. But what's so nice about it, what's so lovely, is you can see people walking around. The guy standing here with a rifle. If a guy standing with a rifle in Old Town today, arresting right away. And so this is what the finished convent looked like. It was used both for teaching on the first floor, and the sisters lived on the second floor. It is still there today, of course, and it's a gift shop. And so this is probably about 1887 when this picture was taken. You can see that the maintenance on the building was just constant, and still is, I think, today. This, I think, is interesting. This is after the construction, a terrible picture. But you can see that the second floor of the rectory is now there. So in 1880, when the railroad came, the buildings, the modern buildings in Albuquerque, were built with brick, or they were built with frame. A lot of them were just simple frame buildings, but the better buildings were built with brick. And so when they built this, the second floor, it's an adobe construction, both first floor and second floor. They didn't want it to look that way, so they put a brick over the whole thing. They put brick. Well, that's fine, except by the 1930s there was a real interest in old Albuquerque culture and everything, and so they stuccoed all over it again to make it look like it was an adobe building, which it is. So that's an interesting little story about the buildings of San Felipe. And of course, this is the way the church looks today, and that's the end of part 2. So we got it in an hour's time.
Yeah.